Yeah.
Feeling a little different. Did it come back on with the?
Yeah.
They're not connected. The call.
We're gonna go ahead and get started. Does everyone have it in front there? That'll be helpful to follow on your project today. What's that? There. Do you want to just the agenda? Should I turn it over to you? Yeah, sure. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Stephanie Magnan. I was on last time, but another meeting down this way, so I thought I'd actually attend this meeting. I feel like it's helpful to get faces and names and the physical connection being on site. So thank you for having me. So this meeting, we're going to talk about some of the public outreach and the first couple sections of the plan. And we can get through that and then start looking at the hazards and the impacts to the town. So last year FEMA put into practice new regulations that are needed in the plan. The biggest piece is looking at vulnerable populations, making sure everybody's included in knowing that this plan is being updated, trying to reach out to those folks. And if you can't hear me, let me know. It's going to put your hand up. I just tend to start loud and then get quiet and stuff. Making sure that the entire community is involved with this process, either directly involved in attending meetings or making sure that they're getting notifications that things are occurring. And sometimes it's through other organizations, some of the nonprofits, emergency services know pretty much everybody in the towns and has that connection with folks, so they can act as a voice for them also. So Morgan, have you posted anything yet on the plan update? I have done a little word in the draft news. Okay. And then I just did like an email reminder. That other than the Grafton is something. Like the monthly. Any email distributions. Yeah. So do you have a good place in town to post things? Yeah, we have two bulletins downstairs. And one at the library. We do one at the Grafton. So there's a couple of those. Yeah, you think it would be, you think folks would participate in the questionnaire? I think so. Okay. So I can send you a list of a template that I've used. Right. It goes down, it's basically, you've been through an event. Things like that. But did you get fun? Did you get flooding? What do you feel is important that the town needs to consider the update of this plan? It's straightforward. You use social media. We do have a Facebook page, and we can use that. Should introduce. So, community stakeholders do you have? Especially churches. We have the Grafton Community Church,
the Grafton Inn. And then foundation. General store. Stakeholders.
Meals on Wheels, or people that, organizations that have connection with the community.
The school. Elementary school.
Anybody mentioned the Grafton Care?
No, Grafton Cares.
And that is,
Environment, we Grafton Cares, we do meals up at the chapel, right? Yeah.
maybe do meals.
Yeah. Meals and dinner once a month.
That also have supported commonly used convalescent sorts of medical equipment that goes out on loan. People need it.
Out of the Grafton Cares.
Are there any other groups that we're forgetting? Okay. There's the Grafton Improvement Association.
It's the Grafton Association you.
They own a lot of land, do some land evaluation stuff. And the scholarship,
Get that. They kind of things in the community like the flags and the
yeah,
organized.
they help with like cemetery farms. Community, picnic. They donated to. Fire department. Food donation. Paid for. They're involved with trail system. Yeah, that covers most of what they do. That's where I think they're on. Not much here, yeah, big industrial buildings or companies.
More likely. Staple. So one of the items that I had on the agenda that skipped down to the last item, which was identify a list of critical facilities. So now we're talking about community stakeholders, that's almost a very similar list. So you have the fire station. The town, this is the town office, better than.
What's at the tiny town highway department?
Yeah, you're fine, man.
Yeah,
Because I came over.
what is it?
Fisher
But-
But yeah.
But you have to understand, if our roads are compromised, they can't get out. And no one can access any services,
Right.
because if you're in Irene. All roads coming into Grafton, we couldn't get in there.
Were you one of the towns that was isolated? Or-
Yeah.
Yep.
So, the new, is the fire station fairly new? It looks unique. It's
30 years.
Oh, so it's 30 years. Wow, in great condition now that that gets flooded also during.
No.
No, probably close, but close because you couldn't get.
So,
It was basically a staging area for a lot of things.
Yeah.
that's what I
Flies
was.
that came in.
The whole town, highway, the stage was wonderful.
And does the town highway typically stage there, say like last week, did they do that?
And many of the contractors just,
Okay. So at least you have a plan in place in case.
Could you cut the Grafton Inn on like that? When our houses were unlivable, they were giving free rooms and charging for electric phones and just generally getting a place to go. And they did it as well on Main Street, the main.
formal shelter or? That sounds like a really great deal,
Yeah.
at the end is a.
Long history there.
Yeah.
At one point, we had a formal Red Cross shelter at the elementary school. The American Red Cross kind of disappeared from the area and disavowed any such thing after a while. We have, as a town, designated this room as a cooling and warming. And if we had to, and took on the liability ourselves, we could potentially use the school because it's town funded an emergency generator over there. To be able to provide power.
That school building does not have cooling, but
This building, how would you put it?
we are connected onto a generator that's on weather. There's been people online. Andy, can you hear us okay?
I apologize. I left my computer at home, so I'm working off an iPad, and so navigating is difficult. I can hear you. It's not great, but
Okay, okay, great. Just so everyone knows, this is the superintendent.
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you.
That's really good. You actually see one.
Yeah. It's not the best.
Well, in a room like this,
It's
it's hard because of the acoustics. Yeah.
Sorry.
Does that have the option of having like, extensions where you can put like microphones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want that a little closer to there? I think it's, no matter where we place it.
Yeah, it's,
Maybe it was a general problem.
when I was, the last meeting, I could hear it here, but I could not, so you sat over here last time.
Yes.
Yes.
I've had a lot going on, so I've asked the planning commission to take it over.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Upgrading the system, or-
Yeah.
So the generator is shared with who again?
The Wyndham Foundation.
Okay.
That generator also powers the main end and their homestead building, which just has more guest rooms. It's large, it's huge.
Yeah, it's a big generator.
And is that, did you get that through a grant or?
The Wyndham Foundation did not get it through a grant, and it was installed, I think, in the fall.
Except
Last fall.
it's been there for a long while. This is an upgrade from what they had before. What's propane?
I think it's diesel.
These ones, yeah. Is there something about sharing the fuel costs? No,
So the town paid the Wyndham Foundation, I think it was $15,000 for the connection, and that was to cover.
Yeah.
General expenses for it.
Town garage. Is critical facilities or any discussions about moving that,
figure out.
or is that? Just a known issue and you just stage during.
I mean, I think it's just a known issue. Yeah, but it was moved in 2012. So, yeah, I think the immediate plan is just to use another site station.
And it was the original one you said was destroyed or made into an island.
The Virgin Americans.
So with the fire station, the town office, the Grafton, the school, the town office, and the town garage. And at the fire station is rescue there also.
Other sort of critical infrastructure would be the Brecken village garage down here where one can refill gas tanks underground.
So is it
Yes,
the old garage or is it?
yeah. This is an independent business,
Oh, Grafton Garage.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Brecken village garage. And our library during that area served as a hub for volunteer service.
Um, Is your EOC in this building? Yes. Is that what plugins are for that?
I don't know.
Yeah, which is the operations that.
These plugins, date back to when the Nature Museum was set up in here,
Well,
many, many years.
I guess it's helpful, but it's not there for that purpose, like.
That
We,
was.
we do, however, have a couple of RF feeds from the antennas on the roof, so we set up a ham operator in here.
Okay. Which brings up a good question, like, I'm on SOS here. How was your radio, how was your like, town garage speaking to the fire department?
It's okay, it's not the best. Depending on where they're located, it's very spotty. Yeah. Yeah.
And this should be considered a critical facility, it's not manned, but we have a radio repeater site. Up along the peaks here that serves both the town municipal radio and the fire and rescue radio.
And isn't there cell at the tower built in the chimney of the tower?
Yes,
AT&T.
But it's AT&T.
Where is that?
It's in that across the street.
it depends on an underground. Period, ties into the telephone networks. I'm not sure of this, but I think it eventually winds up in Putney. It was one of these high capacity cables. So that has to remain intact and all for that AT&T power to tie into the bigger network.
And is that buried, you said?
It's part of the cable fiber network, but I don't know exactly the details.
Any of fiber running through town, is that correct?
Yeah,
And what hill is the radio tower on?
it's, well, for practical purposes, it's called Bear.
Bear Hill.
Yeah.
That's off there, right?
Right.
Getting back to reviewing of the intro purpose and community profile. Folks have had a chance to look at that. But you get a lot of information, visual attachments have a lot of the same information, so. Census, what I'm interested in this census. Feel like the household numbers. Are from previous years. They're lower than what the last census was, I mean. Seems Even though the population's going up, the household numbers for them, so.
You talking about the P911 addresses?
No, the census information that came out in 2020.
So, I mean, I don't, really, and it's all pretty standard text, I think, but, I'm assuming under the time profile, you would use the 2020 census instead of.
Is that what you're using those numbers for? Is that for people who live here? Or people who live here sometimes, or transients, or I'm just curious, I don't. What's the purpose of asking for this census?
So it's getting an understanding of, how many people you're dealing with in an event. And actually, you bring up a good point, the census data only gives you a particular snapshot,
Yeah,
but it might be important to mention if you have a large influx of folks that come in to see
so
something.
an example would be, sometimes the weddings at the inn have 200, 300 guests. And if there was a flood, plus then there'd be no rooms for any of us to stay in. And so forth, and we've just been talking at select board meetings about all the Airbnbs. Brought up a number of 38, soft number, but if 38 Airbnbs each have at least 4 people in them, So if we're talking about, what the town might be eligible for, that's why I was asking, I think, if it's about what the town becomes eligible for in terms of emergency services or whatever, there could be a lot more people in the summer in particular.
Oh, exactly, yeah, there's.
Well, foliage season.
And full,
Foliage
absolutely, yeah,
season.
foliage
Yeah.
season. Or almost any time, but
Well,
mostly the weddings and foliage, yeah.
mud season, it's not so.
Yeah, that's true.
You mentioned the census for Grafton, isn't it the person that's taking the census is a resident, is that correct?
Not always, so the person that came to our house was hired, they may be a local person, but they're a US Census employee.
No,
I'll
no,
be-
I'm not saying that, I'm saying. When you get it in the mail, you have to fill it out. But does that mean those that fill it out are residents here? Because a lot of the people that are Airbnb or second homeowners are not gonna be here. But they still have an E911 address,
Correct, yeah, you're
but
right.
it's not gonna be reflected in the census. And every time a person fills a form out, mails it in, that's money that's generated for the town.
Correct. So if folks don't send it in,
Right.
then they physically send somebody out
Oh, I see what you're saying.
and knock on the door, so I don't know what happens with the
If they
Airbnbs.
Fine then.
Right. So is it better, do you think it'd be better to get the information from, say, the planning commission? I mean, do you have a better, does the town have a better understanding of how many people live in town, what the influx might look like? How many households you have? I don't know, the tax, I mean,
The temperatures, and I have a better idea. It's not gonna be.
it doesn't have to be exact, but
Yeah.
those are valid points to bring up, especially if you have an influx of people.
I think our population's around 720 or so, roughly. But as mentioned, when there's events in the town or weddings, are people that fill up the Airbnbs. Depending on the foliage season, ski season, summer. That number can triple.
Austin's population for the 2020 census was 6.5.
Decrease in 2010, 679.
Probably if you look at the lower list. Starting against the light,
I think that was in like,
that's not gonna be that.
And would you, the demographics, would you say, it's a older population, middle-aged population? Or is it diverse? And the census data has that too, so I can get that from there, I just didn't know if you might have it anecdotally. Well,
Just have to look
Vermont.
at
yeah, the census
the
data has,
elementary school
Yeah. well, it's very-
population,
it
and
is.
know that, yeah, we're all.
well, and that's normal across the state, I mean, the governor's been talking about that since he's taken office, it's going to encourage. More people to come back into Vermont to.
Yeah, the baby boomers are good. Up there. Yeah.
There's a little section in here about the free platforms. And as far as I know, that was not changed. When this was brought up. It's on page 10, at the very top, and I go. Think that wall.
And I noticed, having some names,
That has to be-
that's to be
Major.
updated.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was the last one, so, yeah, we get that updated. So. Let's go through your best for the numbers. So the fire department, describe that. I'm assuming it's all volunteer.
It is,
You know how many members?
From fire and rescue, I think there's around 20
Total?
overlaps, so
Yeah.
the average is 20 active.
You probably have all that information in your annual report, so.
Those volunteers also are between Grafton and Athens. So there's some volunteers that are not Grafton residents.
And they do cover Athens, fire and rescue.
So it's kind of like a mutual aid.
both the fire department and rescue are independent corporations. Not officially municipal departments.
And when you mentioned mutual aid, the fire department especially will go to other towns outside of Grafton.
There's always that backup. You don't know how many terms and usually.
I think they train with, I think, 7. Everyone.
But they'll go on calls as far as Weston and or, I mean, if there's a large event, they'll pull papers.
Yeah.
What they
They
use.
big backup,
Yes.
so same thing happened in Sunday. in your law enforcement? This town contract with the,
State police is our primary law enforcement for certain services. We've got a contract.
You have a
Sure.
contract with the sheriff.
Let's see, state police will respond to like emergency events. That's about 16 hours a month. The Monroe County Sheriff. The contract with is not as for patrol 14.
Water and wastewater.
Who's that? Good, answer that question. We don't have, a neutral municipal water system or sewer system. It's up to the individual.
Private.
Private owner supplies on water and sewer.
And even in town like this building, since I'm well. Maps. With the planning commission, to zoning bylaws.
We have a subdivision regulation, and we have flood zone. That's it.
State participate, national flood insurance. State land use. Is it agricultural or is it?
Land use, mostly agricultural. Maybe 2 or 3 farms and that's. It's all private.
The state forest, is that within? the town? Where is it?
We'll pull up our maps. I've done here.
Oh, okay.
If you wanted to look at what the agency of natural resources thinks. I think we're all essentially forest blocks, except for
But everything.
lies along the streams here. I'm not sure that's the opinion of many of the residents. They don't come up on the site.
They don't.
No.
That's unique.
They're listed maps, so.
Let's see, we're gonna pull these stores here. See, this is that spot. See what?
Yeah, those maps there are going to appear in our town plan. Better reflect what practical thinks Oh, I have.
I will look at the town plan.
We have maps on the wall too.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these were done by Wyndham
Yes,
Regional.
yeah.
There's several homes in the village, outside this village, go down Downton Road. Or actually, any one of these roads. You have residents that have vast acreage of land that's open. And it's all private. I think there maybe down on Downton Road, there's a couple of farms. Like maple sugar cane. And there's one deer farm here. I don't know if it came in from the stalls.
It's like, oh, this road is open. So the folks that live in Grafton, do they travel to work, or do folks mainly work in town?
I'd say majority probably travels outside of town.
Or work from home,
Well,
since COVID?
Or retired.
before I was just gonna say retired.
There, I don't know what the percentages are for working at the inn or the cheese company. Way back, it did house a lot, I mean, that house did employ a lot of people.
You're saying that past, not so much anymore?
Well, I think with different CEOs and again, COVID and closing the cheese company. Taking the cheese company and putting it down in Brattleboro and now it's back here, it did a lot for the employment.
We had 9,200 at one time.
9,200 people living in town?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
I'm like, what?
But most of them came from out of town.
Gotcha.
I don't know if it's that much.
Now, is Grafton, silly question, I'm being ignorant, because I know like Cabot is owned, still owned cooperatively, but is Grafton owned by a local foundation? So it wasn't like. My breaking is. Like Vermont Creamery in Websterville, Vermont, was bought out by the States. It is kind of sad to see how those industries start in a moment and then get bought out, they're just, and then they tend to disappear. I that's, I don't know if anybody remembers ISIS clothing, clothing line. It was, of course, didn't help with, coincided with the terrorism.
It's very hard to get employees in Vermont. I was just at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund meeting, and we were all saying the same thing. There's no affordable housing in Grafton. So, you know, if you're gonna work at the inn, you're probably not gonna live in Grafton. As the same for all of us businesses. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if all businesses stay in Vermont, but there's nowhere for people to live. It's a big problem. And that's a Grafton problem in terms of who lives here and works here. It's,
Right, but that's not uncommon, I just saw something on either 60 Minutes or something that talked about town out west.
Yeah,
where
it's all
you can't-
around.
They literally have to drive 2 hours over
Yeah,
the mountain to live affordably.
yeah,
And
it makes it impossible to have a business. Cause your employees can't afford to live in a reasonable distance.
through everything on the agenda, so, so let's talk hazards. Events. Public.
Hazardous events other than flooding?
I'm sorry.
Who said hazardous events?
Hazard events, so flooding, wind, it's not on the agenda, so I thought we could start talking about it this, the ending part of this meeting.
There's a city.
And I can send you the spreadsheet.
Oh, great.
Seems like our old plan had a matrix that
Yes, and
goes up.
it was probably a ranking system.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll do the same thing. And it may have changed.
Probably a lot more wind events and ice events. Ice and not as much snow. I know GMP is doing quite a job. Making sure the wires aren't strong enough to withhold any branches that are coming down. And they've been doing a lot of cutting of the trees or branches and undergrowth to prevent that. I know town budgets in terms of the highway code with use of sand and salt has increased.
When stacking the infrastructure. Like culverts that.
Yeah.
We have to be able to launch.
Yeah, I would imagine that you have a lot of roads that are associated with waterways. Yeah. The MRGP program, municipal roads grants program.
Yeah, usually we have like maybe one mud season, and I think this year we had maybe 4 or 5.
Everybody, I think. And wind events, we lost Christmas 2022, I think it was. In my house, we lost 80 trees on the drive. Our drive is a quarter mile long. It was either a quarter mile long or a bridge over a brook that lakes to me and bridge, so it's a quarter mile. Which is fun when you're young. Yes, and then you bridge. So, yeah, I feel like wind is really, has changed a lot in the last 5 years. So,
So we have encountered because of the wind, a lot of power outages in sections of Grafton.
This last storm, the town was out of power for 6 hours.
Tuesday.
And we had a house damaged by wind.
so when I was driving over, somebody had a little. You know, next to their driveway that said no more power outages, is that like a? It was like maroon and white. And I believe that's what I saw. It's like, oh, that's interesting. What's that? Power outages?
We do.
And you're on TNT.
Yes.
Interesting, because I'm on Washington Electric, which is a cooperative area of the rural areas. We have a generator, we gas, oven, and cooktop, just for that reason. Yeah. I did, interesting. There's one.
And then some homes are isolated areas. Where we may have power, they do not. There are sections of areas like Athens and part of the Kingsport and Grafton area where. I know for myself, we were out several days. Whereas everybody else had power. A gentleman was on Otis Road, was out yesterday. Got his power back for a couple of hours and then now again for another 6 to 8 hours. And that's just one person, so we have spotty places in Grafton that Yeah.
That you know, like, yeah, we know if our covers going out. Because it's not so much that we're at end of the line, but there's not many people on the line. so
Right.
We just learned to live with it. Unfortunately. The last couple of Christmases we've lost for a couple of days. So, one of the generators, getting was. So this is what matrix. That will be fun. This really people. So the state hazard mitigation plan has all the hazards that are listed in B. But sometimes towns will describe it a little bit differently. Like thunderstorms, ice jams, and then you can kind of associate it with the hazard that the state recognizes. So hazard mitigation plans for FEMA, they're only recognizing natural hazards. They don't recognize things like transportation issues or hazardous material spills, cyber attacks. Those are all man-made. But if you feel passionate enough, if there are some towns that have, high truck traffic, you feel like having hazardous material as a hazard type in your plan, it's perfectly fine. They just don't review that section formally, which I think that's gonna change in the next 10 years or so. So those, so you've got fluvial erosion, inundation flooding, wind, hail, landslides, ice, snow, cold, heat, drought, wildfire, earthquakes. And then there's
Invasive species, yeah.
invasive species, infectious disease, and then the two at the bottom, you're not formally recognized.
What is a structure of fire?
Structural fires. So, yeah, those are just other examples of man-made. Some towns have had a lot of structural fires, recognize that as something that they want to consider in their new plan. Because the idea of the hazard mitigation plan is to identify these things, so it helps with other grant opportunities by, actually recognizing these issues that you want to mitigate future risk. So I don't know if we'd like to start grading these, or if you just want to talk about events that have happened, because we've got about 10 minutes left.
Well, I think it's frustrating, the flooding that's happened, and it happens over and over and over again to the same places. And when I look at this information, and to the end, you've got prevention. And you got to come up with ways of preventing this. And when you look at it, they tell you you can't do it. So you're back to square one again, and the flooding occurs. The resident has major damage. And it's just, it's more than frustration, it's anger for me. And feeling helpless. And if you go back in Vermont's history with flooding, we didn't have this, we had rivers that had deep sections where the water would flow. But then you have a floodplain where everybody built, and it broachures onto the river, and now the river is spread out. So how do you do prevention when that happens? You can't, they won't let us go out and dig out. We've got places where the rivers are right to the road. On 121, and now you look over and you see. Mounds. Of
Gravel.
gravel.
You said it.
Why can't you take it out? Why can't the town use that? Why can't you put up berms? We live in an area, growing up. In Massachusetts. In a small town. Near Springfield and West Springfield. The floods back in the 1900s were. Horrendous. And they built berms, one town built a berm. That prevented the floods, our town didn't. Yeah, that's what happened.
I was talking with Scott Johnson, the river management engineer, just the other day. And we were talking about berms specifically and, you know, I don't know mechanics of it, and I know not, you probably know a lot more than I do, but. He was saying that with a berm, you know, it restricts where the water goes, it can spread out. and-
Water is faster,
You know, because in a smaller area, it's a speed and.
so if they mitigate. With, like, you know, berm, you're gonna mitigate it somewhere else,
Transfer
where it can go.
Transfer the problem downstream,
Yeah.
increase the velocity, which increases the fluvial erosion. Which puts more gravel into the stream and fills up the stream beds. So, as the river engineers and KNR, I think we're at so say that we have to both and establish a return of floodplains where the river can go and disperses energy, rockets, burn the silt ground, without putting vast quantities of water down there. The berm prevents flooding in the property that it's built on, but it increases the velocity. Usually is built in a floodway, which is contrary to the FEMA regulations for flood insurance. So they get caught doing it, or we're supposed to have them remove it. Moves the problem downstream and flood somebody else. Well, we have been missing, I think, in both local and national approaches to this is moving our infrastructure out of flood danger. As in putting houses on stilts, moving villages to higher ground, moving structures into those higher ground locations. And putting in building codes such that we're not flooding out the electrical and heating resources within the structures. Those are all expensive things to do, and in my experience, municipalities don't do anything unless someone else is funding it. Go to the FEMA folks, they don't fund it, it doesn't get done. Getting done off the soapbox.
I just say that what I see missing in the town, and my house is over 200 years old, so it wasn't built in a floodway. But that has happened over time. That what I don't see is a big plan. So yes, it's very expensive and so on, but there's no large view, a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. What I do see is the town protecting its roads and using the river as a giant storm drain. So all the culverts dump in the river, private properties dump in the river. There's a town culvert on my property that dumps in the river like about 10 feet from where my house was on my property. And I get all that, I absolutely disagree with you. Sorry, agree with you. I don't disagree with you. I do think dissipating it is the right answer. And areas where it can infiltrate and so forth. I don't have enough property to let everything infiltrate on my house. But what I don't see is is the town looking at the culverts, all of these culverts. All of the houses, all of it as a package. And saying, even going back to the headwaters and Wyndham. That if we're going to look for areas to dissipate it, we're gonna have to look in this giant way. And we spend a lot of money on culverts and replacing culverts and repairing culverts. But has anyone ever really thought about, is this the best idea? Cause that water, instead of running it into the river. And again, in the past, different decisions were made, I'm not trying to criticize that. But that once, instead of running everything into the river, couldn't it be dissipated in some of this other acreage, as you described? It is private property, but if people have many, many, many acres not using it, and it wouldn't flood them. That they could be approached to do this. But I have never heard the town at all say, let's stop band-aiding this problem. And do it. I don't want my neighbors to flood downriver. I don't wanna be flooded because everyone's dumping their runoff upriver. So can part of the hazard mitigation plan say that we have to have a big long-term plan to stop the river from being a storm drain, because to me, that's all that's happened here.
Correct.
Certainly can be added. And that's what's decided, you know,
Yeah.
come up with a bunch of actions and then kind of prioritize them. And you bring up an interesting, so when I was in Florida working Hurricane Ian, I went to this park one day. And it's actually a natural area that's been created from all the stormwater running. And it's, you know, you've got the walkways that go over, bridges that go over the ponds, there's fishing in there. And it's, you know, I thought about that when the new stormwater regulations came out for developments. So in my town, 2 developments had to conform with the new regulations, even though they conformed when they initially built them. And, you know, that's one of the thoughts that I had is maybe you can run it off into a natural area and create a park, but I mean, not every town has that acreage to do something.
No, see, that's why it has to be back up, big picture, into the entire river corridor from its headwaters down to where it meets the Connecticut River. Because all of the people along there are suffering from the stuff. And if everyone was cooperating, I know that's a big deal, I know it's expensive, it would take years. But you have to start somewhere, and my house would probably wash away before that happened. But, you know, the state's decisions, and I agree about the birds, I think all you're doing is speeding up the river. If you deepen it and narrow it, you're just gonna speed it up. And then when it hops the bank, it really is gonna need to take more stuff out. But on the other hand, most of them, you know, I can't afford to pick up my house and move it. I can't afford to put it on stilts. It would probably fall apart if I tried to put it on stilts, it's so old. So there should be some leeway. Or else you end up with a bunch more unhoused people, and is that really what we want? Because I can't live in Grafton if they do a buyout, they won't give me enough money to live in Grafton, so. And you just end up with less citizens in a town. So, and if that's all part of a big picture, I think that would.
Really noted. That's my- Any last thoughts?
Well, my bugaboo is. What's just been said. The people in Washington or wherever they are that. Deals with FEMA or the money. They seem to be the last ones. To make a big hurrah, come here and tell us where they're gonna help us. Well, I never see them get the mud on their boots or their hands. And they need to be in places like small towns, small rural areas. to see what we're faced. We never get the money, we never seem to get the support, but we get a lot of talk. And that doesn't help us, it just makes us more angry, makes me angry. So I'll stop because no one's saying.
After Irene, the town had a hard time with, FEMA. Supporting any kind of build back of drainage structures any larger than they were to begin with. Which did not, represent the kind of hydrology that we're dealing with today. Just begs to have them washed out again.
And that's where mitigation comes in to play is. During the actual public assistance process, it's basically building back unless you want to keep it. In its current state of disrepair and then. Have some mitigation funds to come in and actually build back that, and that's where, so I worked with V-Trans for many, many years and. I think, you can tell me I'm wrong, but 121, I mean, so there was a lot of time spent building that better, there's a lot of roads, state roads. That were built back better, in my opinion, and that's because federal highway does it differently. You have to get pre-obligated before you even start to move any kind of soil. Unless it's, you have isolated people and that's the only way to get in and out.
Even,
So, I think FEMA could take some lessons from federal highway in that aspect.
even though 121 was built back, you look at the history of all the flooding we've had in the last 5 years, the same places are still flooded. Same expense has to go back into the road or more.
Can you list those off?
Oh, yes, you probably can. I mean, the records, we got all our paperwork, what we've had to do with replacing everything.
Road by Rushton Park,
Yeah,
second time that's what we.
we almost lost a person. During our,
What road is that? It was 121.
car was swept into the road, and she got hung on a tree. She was there for several hours before we had to wait for the river to get down, get rescued to get her off the tree. That was starting at rain.
And that still floods?
Yeah, it was.
Well, it doesn't damage the road drainage there. Beyond there. That's some
Oh my
significant.
God, the whole, yeah,
They took
from
out the
Charlie
road.
Lane's all the way down.
Yeah, there are two sections south there and downstream that were made impassable.
And maybe, so you must have access to grants portal, so you can pull that. Yeah. That's one of the things that I found out the other day was, using that information from past events. But it's not public information, you have to know somebody that has. Access to it, I'm sure you can do a FOIA with this, but. So that's good information that not.
And I know with all the rain and the flood waters have really damaged a lot of our hay fields. Where people have gone in and we've done the whole field twice, I know of, down by 121, Backwards River. And it's just heartbreaking to see the work put in and then have the whole river right into that field.
Well, it's a perfect example, we need to get in the river and divert the gravel pile up. Put it back, the river back where it was supposed to be. And I'll stop that.
But what a heartbreak.
That's a good example, there's certain sections of the rivers that there's no reason why they can't go in and harvest the gravel. And make the river a little bit better and utilize the material.
There's still debris in the river from Irene.
And that's why, well, Irene, they're still debris. So yeah, we had flooding very last year and my road is washed out right now because of the huge debris pile that was left.
Yeah, they say you can't go in it, fish have to live, there's no fish.
I think it's being noted up north too, most recent one, a lot of comments from just landowners and
Oh, it's all.
they know the rivers need to be dredged out up there. They're flat rivers now. They're no longer deep rivers.
And I think there's a happy medium of being able to take material out, but keeping it natural enough
Yeah.
and using the energy by putting in, the rivers. So there's a couple rivers and streams, trainings that DNR puts on, I think that are very, very helpful to kind of understand. You need to slow that down and there's ways to create habitat too. There's a way to create a happy medium. It's just a process.
Oh, we're lucky here in Grafton to have, Skip Wiles, done beaver deceivers and. There's many areas in Grafton are beautiful natural spots for wildlife. And wetlands. We want to keep that.
Well, thank you, appreciate meeting with you today. So next month we'll look at that matrix and go through and rank them.
Are there going to be another couple sections or will we just send those first?
I can set out a couple sections, so going through ranking those hazards. And then looking at the last plan's mitigation actions, and I can send that piece out too. And going through them and identifying whether or not they were done, they were accomplished. And if they weren't, do you want to move them into the current plan, or are they relevant anymore? Just should be stop. So.
I'm so curious on that list, we have invasive species. Why is that on the list? That's FEMA list?
It's for Vermont.
Why is invasive species on that list? As a hazard?
Because it can, I guess from an agricultural standpoint, it could probably overtake, I'd have to read the section a little bit more in detail, that's fairly new.
You get the Mount Long River, that's invasive. Vermont was taking care of that back in the 70s and they didn't. And or whatever. Wildlife or endangered species reasons. A lot of things need to be really observed, what's happened, what wasn't done, may need to be done in the future.
Yeah.
There's bittersweet, there's wild grape, there's wild rose.
Poison
And
parsnip,
parsnip, and we're not doing anything about it.
Japanese knotweed.
There's some simple chemical ways to take care of it that are safe, that they need to address. Otherwise, it will become a human hazard. Wild parsnip is pretty much deadly to people.
My niece was severely burned by it.
I read an article about the reason you've seen it along the highways is because of the salt along the highways, those high sodium.
It's created.
Yeah. Yeah, they're saying it was because of carbon monoxide, but it's not, it's from the salts that were. We do use a lot of salt. They won't know anything about the excess use of salt in Vermont. New Hampshire does. Applicators have to weigh their salt for a certain area, they don't in Vermont. You trip over piles of salt, it's way overused. So that's another. I'd add that to a hazard.
Absolutely. Great.
I would agree with Kathy's earlier comment about, snow not being relatively as big a hazard as, flooding and ice storms, in other words, violent weather, other than snow.
It's becoming,
That's a hazard.
we don't have showers anymore.
No.
You get Florida down, I don't know if you've ever been in Florida, and it's like, they get 2 feet of rain in an hour. And that's what we're getting, it's not getting. So, and that's a whole other section that. Climate change needs to be recognized in.
We're talking about, forest, restorations. And for logging and maintaining our forests a little bit better. So a lot of the problem we're having is heavy snows, is look at what trees are falling. They're older hemlock and older trees that should be taken down. They're just tipping over.
With the old dashboard causing, the ash trees to
Trees
die.
have a lifespan and they're reaching their lifespan in Vermont and they need to be addressed.
We saw it on our property 2 years ago. I mean, literally within 2 hours, we lost 80 trees, the shear just came right through our.
Yeah, they just tip over.
Yeah, well, some of them snapped, we had some pine trees that were probably 36 inches in diameter. They were we had been talking, we need to get those down, nature took care of it for us, but. And those are educational opportunities for landowners. That there is a life expectancy in trees.
Yeah, a lot of property isn't being properly forested right now. The property in Chester, they're just. Ignorant of the fact they need to be in there, taking out some trees, but they don't want to take out any trees. And they don't realize that you take out the trees, you'll produce more trees,
More trees.
better trees.
Yeah.
You're in a secondary forest and. You need to kind of alternate your secondary and primary forest.
And
It's
also,
better in Vermont.
increases the deer population. For a healthier deer population. And one of the industries for our area in Vermont is hunting and fishing. And the flooding is really destroyed, especially the fishing.
They need to be careful of runoff when they clear. And I work in a sawmill, so I'm all about cutting trees. I have no problem cutting trees. But for example, cutting in the village park redirected the runoff onto Anna's property and her property starts flooding. So you should do the cutting, you should do the smart forestry, but a component needs to be what's going to happen to the change in the runoffs when you start doing that cutting. And then people just don't think about it, and look at the property and say, while we're correctly forestry, we need to change something else as well to make sure the runoff is going where it needs to be.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.